My name is Xanet Pailet, and I am a sex and intimacy educator and coach who helps people have better sex lives. And I am so excited to share a soulful conversation today with Pearl.
Sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here. Won't you leave
Hey everybody, it's Pearl Sharenza with Women's Successful Living, and welcome back to another Soulful Self-Care Conversation. I am so excited today because those women that are listening, grab your pen and paper, cup of tea, or if you drink your coffee, like I said, I'll let you have some coffee too. But today is one of my favorite subjects, and that is with our guest today, Xanet Pailet. She is a nationally recognized sex and intimacy coach, best-selling author of Living an Orgasmic Life, and the founder of Passionate Intimacy Retreats, where she has led over 100 couples intimacy retreats. It's amazing. After leaving a 26-year sexless marriage and a high-powered legal career, she now helps committed couples who feel stuck, disconnected, or in conflict transform their relationships into ones that are filled with intimacy, safety, passion, and joy. I'm so excited to have this conversation today because this is like one of I do retreats as well. This is a subject that we talk about at the retreat with the women that are in attendance. And so welcome to the show today, Xanet.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here, Pearl, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm excited to have this conversation to help people improve their sex lives. It's
Yes,
something I'm so passionate about.
I know. And it's, and we're going to get into that. I got so many things in my head spinning right now. But first of all, I always, when my guests come on, we never have any questions. I have two or three people that don't come on my show because I won't give them questions ahead of time because I want this to be a natural conversation. However, there is always one question I do ask at the beginning of the show. And if you'll play along with me, I want to talk to little Xanet. I want to ask her, what was life like growing up for her? And what did she want to be when she became this beautiful adult that she is today? And how do the two correlate together?
Wow. Okay. That's vulnerable. So little Janae had a at times very challenging childhood. My dad passed away from a massive heart attack when I was not even 3 years old, and then my mom had a nervous breakdown afterwards. So there was a lot of other family members that took care of me, but it was very challenging. Growing up was very challenging. My mom was also, after his death, I mean, I think even before his death, very needy and narcissistic in her own way. And so there was a lot put on me. I was the youngest. My older brothers were like, my youngest older brother is 13 years older than me. So essentially I was like an only child growing up. So I learned to be very independent. I learned to hold all of my emotions in. There wasn't really any space for my emotional needs to be expressed. I had a hard time. I was bullied a lot on the playground because I wasn't very athletic and I was terrible at kickball. I was always the last person, picked. So I always felt like an outsider. I think that would be fair to say that I always felt like an outsider. That's what little Janae was like.
And so as you're saying that, I correlate so much to that. I was the opposite. I was the oldest and became a people pleaser because of my dad was off at war, and so my mom was learning how to run a household and bring income into the household. While we also got kicked off at base because back then you didn't stay on base. I grew up in Swansboro, North Carolina, at the Marine Corps base, so when he was off at war, we'd go up to upstate New York with my grandmother, with my mom. And so those, like you said, and I was always the last one picked on the thing too, because I was not athletic at all. And so as you're saying that, I'm thinking about what I just read in your bio, and I see how it correlates because, in our sex life, some of those things that you brought up, like the bullying can come in, like if you don't know how to be passionate. My mother's talking to me about sex was, here's a box of Kotex, here's a little thing that's inside, go read it, right? We had no conversation about it, right? So
Right.
there was nothing on that. So I can see where that's why, you're doing what you're doing today is like, that intimacy moments can be so scary, especially if there's nobody that's been there to guide you through it and understand how things change in our life, especially for women. It's like when we hit menopause, how those things change drastically in our sex life. And so I
Right.
can see why, how that correlates to what you're doing today. So thank you. I want to say, first of all, for being vulnerable. I really appreciate you introducing us to her, because it allows me and the listeners to connect to you even
Mm.
more deeply. And many listeners that are like me can probably say they walked that path similar. And to see, I always say, especially at my retreats, and you do retreats too, it's like we all have a story to share. We can't keep the story to self, because there's somebody that's listening or somebody in the room that can learn from us, right? And
Right.
so people are learning from us right now after hearing your vulnerable story that we can still move on in our life. We can still do good things. We can still change people's lives. We are not the sum of what we were brought up to, and those circumstances, but they are still part of us. They're in our DNA. They're ingrained in us. So I want to thank you
Totally.
for sharing her with us.
Yeah. Thanks for letting her be seen.
Yay. Of course. Of course. We wanted to be seen. So tell us, like, in knowing a little bit about little Xanet, tell us like how, like, where I know you talked about you left a 26-year sexless marriage. And
Yes.
I just want to be vulnerable for a little bit for myself too. After our youngest son was born, he's 25 years old now. I had, before we were trying to have kids, I was having 7 years worth of fibro tumor surgery, so it's very overwhelming. And it's like every year, and back then it wasn't laparoscopy, they actually had to do the open surgery for it. And so we struggled having kids. And then
Yeah.
when my youngest son came along through in vitro, our oldest we were blessed to adopt, and our youngest son was in vitro. But even when I was pregnant with him, the same thing happened. And so I had to have a partial hysterectomy after delivering him. And so part of that journey also led to the fact that I went into menopause very young, I
Right.
was in my early 40s. And so that was a struggle. And then the whole sex life, it just changed,
Yeah.
at one point, my husband did say to me, I don't want to have a roommate for a wife, And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
so and that's the best thing I got. I met my husband at 19 years old. That was the best thing I got from his communication, how to communicate that. Right. And so it was a vulnerable conversation we both had, but it was an eye-opening one. So when,
Yeah. Yeah.
and when we talked before and listening and reading your bio, it can be very overwhelming. So tell us about that and what led you to what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I think this goes back to the little Janae story at some level. So I grew up in a very asexual household. My mother never dated after my father passed away. So I had no modeling of anything around sexuality or anything around what a normal heteronormative relationship might look like. But I also was a very sexually curious child as a youngster, like many kids are in a very kind of normal way. But I had a couple of experiences where I got caught playing doctor with a friend and got punished for it. And that really caused a lot of shame in my body. And then my most vulnerable story, which I tell all the time, so I will tell it to your listeners, is, I had a little dog named Lucky. He was a Yorkshire Terrier, and he liked to lick my underwear, which also ended up being very pleasurable for me. But I already knew, because I'd gotten caught before, that this was a really bad thing. And I had a lot of anxiety around it, thinking that my mother would, find out, or she'd walk into my bedroom or something while this was happening. And so at a very early age, the concept of sexual pleasure and anxiety got connected together in a very unhealthy way. And that is what happens very often. These patterns show up, these, traumas, this is called shame trauma, shows up, and then it gets compounded. And so I took that into my sexuality as I grew up as a teenager and as an adult. So not only did I feel a lot of shame around sex, but I felt a tremendous amount of anxiety around sex. I could never relax. And because I could never relax, I never had an orgasm, but also because I could never relax, I had it made penetration extremely painful for me. I had an undiagnosed condition called vaginismus, which is essentially where the vagina just kind of shuts down because it's a muscle, because it didn't feel safe. And that was something that plagued me all through the very first time I had sex when I was 16, all the way into my marriage. I thought it was just kind of normal that it would always be painful, but it got so painful that it was just intolerable. And so we did have sex sometimes because I have two boys, two adults, children now. But pretty much, I got married at 24. But by the age of 28, I had both my children. And so pretty much by the age of 31 or 32, we were done having sex. And there was no conversation about it. There was a lot of drama and tears that were shed. And we didn't have the type of relationship where we could actually have those types of conversations without there being a lot of blame or shame, or I think we were both kind of avoidant. We were very good at avoiding hard conversations in our relationship around us. And that happened, over a couple of year period of times, but over that period of time, another 20 years, our relationship, to the extent that it was even an emotionally connected relationship, which it wasn't. Like, I know that now, but I mean, what do you know at 24, right? Like, that's part of the problem. We became really roommates, like sleeping in separate rooms, taking care of the children. And we were both lawyers, working hard, big jobs. And on the outside, we had this perfect life, was what people were shocked when we separated. They had no idea that this was going on, but eventually the children left the nest, and I couldn't take it anymore. And neither one of us could take it anymore. And we separated at 50. I was 50 when I separated. And then recognized that I was super broken. I felt really broken around my sexuality. And I also knew that I wanted to be in another relationship. I wasn't done with relationships. And I needed to just take a really hard look into, like, what's actually going on here. And, it forced me to look at a lot of my wounding, a lot of my trauma, and then also just go through this, very expansive sexual awakening and healing journey. And that eventually led me to realize I was doing healthcare corporate work. I had my own consulting company at a point. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do something that I was really passionate about, where I could actually help people overcome some of the issues and challenges that I had when I was 24.
I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm sure many listeners can resonate with what you shared. And I made lots of notes. So if you're watching this, I look down, I'm always taking notes because I think it's really important to hit some of the points you brought up. And one of the big points I talked about was, like, like with your mom, you didn't have that relationship, right? So with my parents, there was, like I said, there was no talk about, what a sexual relationship looked like, how somebody, like, even today when we talk to our kids about, the safe touch, not the safe touch, we had none of that growing up. And I
Right.
think, like, I'm 61 on Monday. I think that's part of the generation back then that was that
Yes.
taboo. You don't talk about those things, it was like such a
Right.
taboo. We've come a long way now because there's so much exposure, and, from social media, bringing some of this to our attention, and things like that. But the other part I wrote down was anxiety, anxiety over sexual, and sexual trauma, like learning how to heal that, and how our body does shut down. Like, our body, like you talk about how the vagina is shut down, our body will shut down in different areas, different ways, based on what's happening, and we lost our son 3 years ago to a tragic car accident. And I remember parts of our life just shut down, like our
Yeah.
life, our health, and, it all sort of just shut down. And it took us a year and a half, maybe 2 years, to be like, okay, we got to work back, come back to us, come back to taking care of us. And I remember I did a talk on this. let's see, I probably 6 months into after Matt passed, I talked about how, the sex drive, like, my husband was wanting sex and I was just like, I don't want it. I've lost my
Yeah.
son. That's like the last thing in my mind that I want to even fathom embarking on. And I had to realize that I had to heal that and share with Chuck why I felt this way. And, he helped. That's why I tell everybody all the time, I'm very blessed. I've been married almost 41 years. I have an amazing husband that has been by my side through so many things, supportive in so many areas. And sometimes when I didn't deserve the support, he still gave the support, right? And
Mm,
so, having conversations, and you talk about how there's no conversations, right, for you, and
right.
having those
Right.
conversations, because some marriages, they don't talk about these issues. They just ignore it, and
Totally.
I remember somebody told me one time that they went to their therapist and somebody said to them, there was a couple therapists, and somebody said, you can either choose how much do you guys love each other. You can either choose to work on it now with each other, or you're going to end up working on it with your next partner. Either way, these issues you have are going to come into your next relationship, right?
Right.
And it's
Right.
and it's what you talked about. It's like you said, I wanted to have a relationship. I wanted, unfortunately it didn't work out for you and your husband, but it's you wanted to have that relationship. And the other part you touched on, I made a big circle around it, is from the outside, things look perfect, but on the
Mm,
behind the closed doors. And that's, I do a retreat like you do retreats. Mine are specialized on women, solely on women, so being on self-care, putting self first, understanding no is a complete sentence like yes is. And we talk about how we walk out the door with our makeup on and we make things look like, oh, we're great. But when we take the makeup off, and that's why my retreat is absolutely no makeup, because I want to get to the core of why you're in my room. I want to know what are you hiding that you're trying not to let anybody else see.
mm,
And it's so powerful when we do that. Like, we just had our ninth retreat a couple weeks ago, and I had 4 women, all were speakers, that stood up and said, can I share my true self instead of
mm,
what I told you I was going to share? And it's so, I love that we create that safe space. So when you said outside looks perfect, we have to look within. I thought that's
totally.
so powerful and so moving. But the other part of it too, I said, is healing the trauma. Until we heal that trauma, like you've shared, we can't move forward in certain areas of
No,
our life. It's going to hold us back. Like you were talking about not having an orgasm, right? It's going to hold you back in some way, shape, or form, right? And
100%.
so I'm glad we're talking about this, because those that are listening or those that are watching us, in some way or another, somewhere in your life, you have not shown up the way you want to because you haven't healed something in your life, whether it's something in your sex life, whether it's something in a relationship, or just a relationship with self. And so I think it's a really important in how you reevaluate, like you said, reevaluate your passion, reevaluate what you want in your life. And so tell us how you took what this healing, healing your trauma, and walk us through how you've created what you're doing for others today, and then walk us through that some, would you?
Yeah. So I went on a very expansive healing journey. It started through the doorway of Tantra and sacred sexuality. It just happened to be the doorway that was first open to me, but it was very powerful for me. It allowed me to realize that I could have pleasure in my body. It gave me a different understanding of what sexuality could be, that it could be slow and it could be sensual, and there could be more of like an energetic component to it, which was very intriguing for me. And then I most of my life I was in New York City. That's where my kids grew up. That's where my business was. But I moved to California after the divorce to be able to pursue this whole area around sexuality, because there's so many mentors and trainers and programs in California. And so I just went from one program to the next to the next to the next, because I'm a lawyer. So I need to know everything, right? As much as I could, the psychology around sex. But I really landed in understanding that the only way to actually change things in your sex life is through a somatic, a body-based approach, that you can't talk your way into better sex. You actually have to feel your way into better sex. And so a lot of my work and all of my work now is very experiential and interactive. And because I saw so much trauma showing up in the, I've been doing this for 15 years. So in the first, first 3 years of my practice, even, I saw so much trauma showing up that eventually about 5 years ago, I went through an intensive trauma training program as well, because I felt like that was something that I really needed to understand and have a handle on. And so I also do trauma work with individuals, mostly women. But it's very important to understand where those wounds are coming from and recognize when trauma is in the room and then how to deal with it differently. And I've been, I started out doing coaching for women primarily. And my first book came out in 2018, Living an Orgasmic Life. And that was really focused on helping women understand what their blocks were to pleasure and to sexuality, and then giving them some tools and practices to actually improve their sex life. And I intertwine my entire story, my whole journey into that book. But about 6 years ago at this point, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina. I left California, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina. And I decided that I wanted to start focusing on couples. I felt like, I think because of my own experience, my own wounding, that was something I was really passionate about. And I felt like, well, I've done enough work for the past 10 years with women that I think now I can really feel like I can dig in and work with couples. It's a lot more complicated doing couples work. There's a lot more wounds in the room, and you have to really be very confident about the dynamics of it. So I created a concept to do intensive retreats in Asheville, North Carolina, in my on my property. We have a beautiful, sexy Airbnb, and my retreat clients stay there. Because I have had the experience of doing so many workshops and intensives, that it was really when you got to be with and do the work over a 3 or 4 or 5 day period of time, that change actually happened, that I actually saw transformation happening. Just very different than doing couples coaching, which I was doing on Zoom during the pandemic a little bit, where it just felt like there was not enough accountability. And this again is me. There's plenty of people that do great couples coaching on Zoom. I am not, one of them, unless I really know you and I've worked with you, and then we're just continuing our work. So I created this passionate intimacy retreats, started during the pandemic, and couples come to me very frequently. I would say the majority of my couples are in a sexless marriage. However we define a sexless marriage, they're having significant relationship challenges. Lately, I've had a lot of couples that are here because there's been betrayal, there's been infidelity as well. And it's an opportunity to be really able to, for me to be able to create a unique program for them based on all of the different tools and skills that I have. And for them to be able to really take a deep dive into their relationship, into their intimacy issues, and into their sexual challenges, where I'm coaching them on a one-on-one basis. And I've done over 100 of these retreats, which is amazing because I do them basically twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month. And I've had amazing results. I have like a 90% success rate of couples being in a completely different space when they leave the retreat than when they actually arrived. And most importantly, they're able to maintain those changes for a much longer period of time. And I check in with them periodically. If sometimes I work with them afterwards as well. So it's a very it's a very beautiful space, and I create a very, very safe container for them. We focus a lot on the emotional connection initially, because there has to be emotional safety in the relationship. We work a lot on repair. Many couples therapists do not teach couples how to repair when there are conflicts. And really, I tell my couples all this time, the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy long-term relationship is the ability and capacity to be able to repair conflict in a relatively short period of time, which isn't always easy. but it's very important. And then we'll delve into more of the sexuality, intimacy pieces, and this office becomes a playground where we get to just explore. They get to explore different styles of sexuality. I'm constantly teaching techniques and tools because, Pearl, the thing is, and I know you know this, like everything that I talk about, intimacy, vulnerability, authenticity, sexual styles, all of this can be learned. There's nothing here that somebody who doesn't want to learn can actually learn. And I think it's important that everybody understands that. That's how I was able to heal, right? Because, as broken as I felt, I learned, oh, I can learn how to regulate my emotions. I can learn that it's safe to feel. I can learn the way my body wants to be touched.
I love this is so I mean, oh my gosh, this is so fun to hear you talk about. Like I could actually like picture the transition that a couple can take coming to you as you
Yeah.
create that safe space for them and talk about how they can come from one place of, safe, not feeling safe to safety. And then also the repair. You're so right. Like the repairing part. That's the one thing I would tell you. My parents divorced after 43 years of marriage and they never repaired. Unfortunately, my dad, when I jokingly tell my brother and I tell my husband, if somebody knocks at my door and they're from Vietnam and they say they're my sibling, just let them in because my dad wasn't faithful. And I know that he probably wasn't faithful in Vietnam either. And so, and God bless my mom, her Catholic in her said, stay, stay, stay until she realized at one point in her life, this is not what I want. And there was never repair for them as a couple, and neither one of them have repaired since then because they're both sitting. My dad did marry a second time for a very short time, but they both sit in the same place, two different houses doing the same thing, feeling miserable, sad, lonely, and all that. They've never, either one of them have worked on their stuff. Unfortunately, my dad, I'm sure, has so much PTSD, so he's never even worked on that. And so not having that repair is, and I like what you said too, like of having that, we can learn. And, I met my husband at 19 years old. I did not know how to communicate. When my parents would have an argument, it was like they weren't talking and you came home after 2 weeks and, after walking on eggshells, like, oh, everything's fine. You're like, what just happened? And so when I
Yeah.
met my husband, if I got upset with him, I would just shut down. That's all I knew how to communicate. And so after many, many times of like asking me what's wrong or what's on my mind, he did the smartest thing he could do and he started having my side of the conversation. So
Mm,
today he would talk about what I would say. And then finally I was like, I wouldn't have said that to you. That's not how I'm feeling. It's like, oh, you do have a voice. Let's talk about using that voice.
mhm,
And that's why I'm so happy that he's in my life. But, understanding the blocks, like you said, like what are those blocks? I unfortunately I was sexually assaulted as a child by a babysitter that my parents' best friend's son. And so I never talked about that. And
mm,
interesting enough, like I talked with my husband and brought it up, and our boys, as they got older, my oldest son Matthew, we were wrestling one day, and he just did something that automatically triggered me, and I was like, I panicked, and he's like, "Mama," he was like, "So sorry," and he didn't understand, and I actually had the conversation with him, like, "This is what happened to me," and that's why, and it was. People are like, why would you do that conversation? I go, because he needs to understand if you ever meet somebody else and they have these challenges, he needs to understand that this is reality, that these things have happened in our lives, and so to know and repair and talk about it is so important. And I love that you do these little one-on-one retreats for them. And it changes relationships, it changes marriages, it saves marriages, it saves relationships and things like that. I think it's really, really powerful. And it's interesting you talk about that because at my retreats I do every year, 4 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago now. My good friend Trish, she started as a pure romance consultant, and now
mhm.
I'm so excited for her. She's just gotten her certification as menopause coach. I've watched her blossom from and I remember when I met her, she wanted to sponsor my retreat and she wanted to come sponsor and speak. And I was like, listen, I've been at one of them parties before and I was not comfortable because I felt like I was in a porn show, this girl who ran it. And I explained to her, she's like, that's not how I run it. I want to educate, I want to teach. I'm like, okay. So I told her she could have 15 minutes a day. An hour and a half later, we were still talking on this.
Oh, I bet.
And
Yeah.
and the interesting, very interesting part was how many, even me, who learned so much, but the one that was very interesting was of somebody who was their parents were pastors, and how they didn't talk about these things. And like she has like this puppet, what does she call it? She calls her Clea. Oh gosh, I can't remember what she calls it, but it's basically a puppet of a clitoris, right? And she had that, and
I
like
have one right up there.
yeah, yes, exactly. That's exactly what she has. Now that I see it.
The
And
pussy
and
puppet.
and she was so like, to watch this young lady be in a room, and I'm like going, this is why, like, and I know her history of marriages. I'm like, this is why these challenges have come up, because you don't talk about it, and then you're afraid to talk about it because you're afraid outside people. But why are we bringing these outside people into our intimacy of this, in our room? And so it was so powerful that she is now, I tell her, like, she just finished her fourth retreat with me. We do a segment, and we've grown from the first year we just had like talk about the product, and now we've grown from where I'm like, I want you to do a complete segment on teaching them something, and then that night we have a party. We have a
Yeah.
party with all the stuff that can help us, from the stuff of being dry to whatever, whatever, if a toy, if you need a toy, whatever that is, she brings that and she educates. And every single woman that has been at that retreat, no matter how young or how old they are, say that they've learned something from her. And it's interesting because like I let her sell products, and the product sell, like she has a private, room in the house. They go and meet with her and sit with her. It's so powerful. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because we need to talk, women especially, and then men, we need to talk about this. And as women, I feel, and I think this is a really cool part that it sounds like that you're doing, is understanding that men also have challenges in this area,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
we have to create that safe spot, for them. Like,
Totally.
we want the safe spot to have discussion too, but we have to create that for them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yes, women have a lot of challenges, but men have performance issues. They have erectile dysfunction issues. They have early ejaculation issues. They have their whole set of other types of concerns and problems that they bring into the relationship as well. Right. And so it's so important to me that I look at a couple as a couple, like, let's see, right? It takes, if there's a problem, it's never one-sided. They are usually one person thinks it is one-sided, but it never is. It takes two people to tango, right? And it takes two people to also heal
Yeah,
together.
100%.
Yeah.
So tell everybody, like, how can they reach out to you to learn more about your retreats? And then also tell us a little bit about your book as well.
Yeah. So I have a book that is available now, actually. Well, it's available for pre-sales right now, which is called the Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit: How to Enhance Communication and Create a Lifetime of Passionate Intimacy. And this book is it really is a culmination of all of the work that I've done with couples, and it focuses on the emotional intimacy component of relationship. It focuses on the repair component of relationships. And then I identify 3 areas around sexuality that I think are really important, which is creating a new paradigm for sex, understanding your core desires and fantasies, and then a whole set of different skills on touch as well. And that and you can find me the best way to find me is to go to this website, which is how to improve mylovelife.com, where I offer an amazing free gift, because again, we can learn everything. So on this website, you will find 7 3-minute short little videos of tools and tips to be able to improve your love life, as well as a way to buy my book, find access to me, learn about my couples retreats, both private retreats in Asheville, North Carolina, as well as group retreats that I do in Costa Rica.
Like, Oh my gosh, you do retreats in Costa Rica. That's the one place I want to do my retreats. I've not found a space that can hold 20 to 25 women there
Mm.
that and I've also my other one is Sedona. So if anybody's
Mhm.
listening in either one of those areas, that's my bucket list. We're actually having our 10th retreat next year in Gulf Shores, Alabama. And actually the fun thing is our house is actually called the Pearl. And I did not plan
Oh,
that on purpose.
lovely.
It was just a God moment. It just popped up. I'm like, oh, it's perfect house on the beach, everything. So it's just amazing. So we'll make sure we put everything in there. I love the freebie. I love the sex and intimacy repair kit. I think that's so powerful. I love that that's available for people to grab and get more connected with you and to us well as the retreat. So we'll put everything in show notes so we can get in touch with you and get in a hold of you. So what's something coming up for you? That's like what's planned next outside the retreats in the book? Is there anything new else coming up for you?
Yes. I just, because I'm crazy, I just signed up for to learn how to really create a great experiential online online program. And so I don't know the name of it yet, but next year in 2026, or this may be aired in 2026, so maybe it'll be out by then. um, there will be an experiential online program for couples around around sex and intimacy repair. So yes, I'm very excited about that. I don't know what it's going to look like. It will have like an interactive group coaching component as well.
I love that. That is so, so cool. So this is actually going to be out before Thanksgiving, I believe. So
Okay, great,
but people
perfect.
will definitely get connected with you. And then when you do, make sure we're going to tag you and everything when we put this out. So make sure you tag us back, let us know, and we'll probably just bring you right back on the show to talk about it too. I'd love to
Um,
have you back on and promote
Love
it and
that.
see how we can support it and tell us about it and how it's going. So we'd love to be part of that. So I'm so glad you were on today. I know, many of our listeners, this is a subject that they're either afraid to talk about, don't know how to talk about, and to create that safe space is so, so important. So if this is an area that you're listening to us or watching us right now on YouTube and you want more connection and learn more, please, please, please reach out to Zane because she is a safe space for you to talk to and have that conversation with. And who knows, maybe you need to go to one of her retreats as well and check it out. So I'm so excited that we did this conversation today. And so, before we let you go, and
Hmm.
everybody's listening, if you're new to the show, we have these cards are called Better Questions, Better Life. And so these cards are done by two friends of mine, Diane Allen and Carol Gill. And you can go online and buy them. I get no kickback. I don't have an affiliate link, but they are over 70 cards, and they just are questions to ask yourself. You can journal on, take a picture in while you're going around, whatever it is, make it your mantra for the day. But we're going to shuffle these. And today you're going to tell me when to stop. And I'm going to read a card and we're going to answer it. So here we go.
Okay, here we go.
All right, here we go.
Mm, okay, stop.
Okay, so your card says, "Oh, this is a good one. I like this one. I'm going to answer it with you too. How do I want to be remembered?"
Ooh, that's a really good one. Um, I want to be remembered as somebody who is very kind and compassionate and who was incredibly committed to helping couples and women overcome challenges, who believe so passionately that pleasure is our birthright and that is the message that I want people to remember me for.
I love that. I think that's so powerful. This is something, this question is actually something I coach on. So it's really cool this came up. So for me, one of the things that came up for me is I wore the armors of my titles for so many years, like mom, wife. We tried for 10 years to have kids and we finally adopted our son, Matthew. I just went straight into motherhood, right? God gave me 10 years to be Pearl. So let me just forget who Pearl is. And so I realized as I went from being a health and wellness coach into life coaching that saying yes to my life, I wasn't doing it anymore. I was doing it for everybody else. And so I went on this journey to become a say yes to your life coach. And so in doing so, one of the things I talk about, and the irony of all of this is that I talk about if we're not here tomorrow, what are people going to say they saw you do for you? Not the armor you wore, but like, what did you do? And I remember, 2 days before my son passed, he was here doing some work with my husband in the garage. And he asked me to throw a bottle of water, and I chucked the water to him. And he's like, wow, mom, not only you figured out your shit, but you can throw something. Because I could never throw a football to him, and he played football. And so when he, not knowing in that moment, 2 days later, he was not going to be with us anymore, it was a confirmation that he saw me start stepping in who I was supposed to be, not just his mom. And so I still to this day get up every day. I'm like, what am I saying yes to? Does it serve me? Is it taking my energy? And if it's taking too much of any of that, then I don't do it. And so therefore, like I say to my clients, I can tell you 10 of my friends will sit in my eulogy when I'm not here the next time they don't see me. And they'll be able to say they saw me do things like take staycations at the beach, sit on my front porch swing, go get my nails done with my kids, whatever those are, those things that I can do for self first. And so that's how I want to be remembered, is by that. So I love this
Beautiful.
question. It's so powerful. So Xanet, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate you coming here.
Thank you so much, Pearl, for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. I'm so glad we got to have it.
Me too. And so, as before we go off, I just want to remind everybody: we come into this world, we are a tough oyster on the outside. We have a lot of work to figure out ourselves. But as you do, you get to open up your oyster and you get to find your inner pearl of greatness. So I hope you go out today, as you find that inner pearl of greatness, you live a stronger, happier, empowered, radiant, and original life you're supposed to lead. Have an amazing day. Oh my gosh, you guys, that was such a fun conversation with Xanet. I know some of you might have felt uncomfortable, but that's good because I want you to stretch yourself in that comfortability. So just remember what she talked about. I want you to really hone into is that, you know, conversations around our sex life with our partners are really, really important. And so having the reassurance and somebody that can help you reconnect with your passion, I think is what is a powerful part of what I learned today. And also that we have to heal our trauma to be able to truly enjoy our personal life in all aspects, including our sexual self-care. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. And again, if you want to learn more, reconnect and starting to put yourself first, I would love to help you do that. Just go to wsliving.com. That's wsliving.com, and let's chat. Have a great day.
All clean. Why'd it take so long?